As a former inmate of 10 years in the state prison system, I can tell you exactly what life will be like for YNW Melly if he does in fact end up being sentenced to prison time. And if you don't know who I'm talking about, I'll go ahead and give you the short version. Jamel Demons, aka popular rapper YNW Melly, is currently on trial for the murders of Anthony Williams and Christopher Miramer. And it is widely believed by rap fans that he made the hit song Murder on My Mind afterwards, telling the story of these exact murders. A question I've been asked a lot by all of you is, do I think Melly would survive if found guilty? Here's my answer. So when I make these types of videos, when I'm covering someone who's well known, who's been sentenced to prison or is in the middle of a trial, what are the charges? And is it a charge, if sentenced to prison, that these other inmates would frown upon and really have a issue with, to where that would cause some potential harm to the person I'm talking about? So with Melly, let's go ahead and get this out of the way because it's going to be short and sweet. If he's found guilty and he's sent to prison for the charge of murder, will the inmates care and have a problem with that? No, they're not going to care one bit. They don't care if he's in there for murder. And as you may know, the only charge that other inmates are really going to harshly judge and actually have a vendetta against is if it's something involving a child, which it's not. So he's fine when it comes to what he's actually in prison for. Moving on. I've talked about this before. There is a hierarchy among the inmates in prison, and each inmate is going to fall somewhere in this hierarchy. And with everything I know about YNW Melly, Jamel Demons, and with everything I know and from my experience of a decade in prison, I'm pretty confident I can tell you just about exactly where YNW Melly is going to fall in this hierarchy, what his role is going to be in prison, and whether or not that role is something that does leave him open and susceptible to harm, violence, and possibly not surviving prison, or if it's something where he's pretty much going to live like a king with his feet up on the desk and he has nothing to worry about. So let me go ahead and break this down for you and explain, what is YNW Melly's role in prison going to be? First things first, and this matters when you're talking about prison, YNW Melly is affiliated with a gang. He is a member of the Bloods, and this is a very prominent gang in the Florida state prison system. And when you're talking about someone's experience and what it's going to be in prison, that makes a huge difference. Now, I'll be the first to tell you that being affiliated with a gang, no matter what gang it is, it's not a Willy Wonka golden ticket to a harm and violence-free ride throughout prison for your entire sentence. It's just not. But for the most part, affiliation with a gang in prison will prevent any likelihood of random inmates approaching Melly with violence because he's a smaller guy, or in hopes to extort him financially, or, anything such as that. It's going to prevent a lot of that just by him being affiliated. And this is something a non-affiliated inmate would have to deal with on a regular basis, at least until they set an example or show to the majority of the cell block that this isn't going to work. It's got to be more trouble than it's worth if you try to do that to me. But my point is, just because it prevents a lot of, the majority of that type of confrontational approaches that most people are going to have to go through if they're not in a gang, there's a whole different category of violence that being affiliated with a gang opens you up to in prison. There are rival gangs. Issues happen. People try for the most part to keep the politics, they call it prison politics, to where there's no issues, and that's the way it is for the most part. But things happen. I've seen it plenty of times, and it's not going to stop. It's going to happen plenty of more times. And the fact that you're affiliated with a gang, even though it prevents a lot of unnecessary violence and just predatory, a bigger inmate just coming and trying to just throw his weight around on you, if things happen in a gang war or a riot, you're going to have to participate. And so he could, I mean, this is a big reach and this is a big what if, but it's possible. If a gang riot happens between him and the Crips or the G's or any other gang that is present in the Florida state prison system, you never know what could happen. I mean, all it takes is one correct stab with a prison shank to end your life. And that right there could be the result where he doesn't survive his prison sentence. But let's put that to the side and keep going with, where he falls in this hierarchy. Because, yeah, even though it's a what if, even if it did happen, a big prison riot, a big gang war, and he was involved in that, and people are getting stabbed and he gets stabbed, it takes so much to actually die and kill someone with a prison-made knife during a riot. It just rarely happens. And it may seem like it's not rare because the only times you really hear about it is when someone dies. But in comparison to how many actually take place in these prisons across the country, and then how many casualties result from that, it's not a lot. Because, I mean, it's not like these guys are going into Bass Pro Shops and getting this perfectly made, industrial strength, made for killing and hunting deer or whatever, perfectly chiseled and designed blades and knives. These are crude, yanked off, broken off pieces of metal or whatever they could find that seems sturdy enough. And no matter how many knives someone's make or how good they are at it and how long they've been doing it, it's not going to compare with an actual knife. And you're all, who knows what quality of knife and ice pick you're getting. And as I've seen many times when knives are used in prison, after about 2 or 3 stabs, when it starts hitting that bone, these knives, the tips kind of dull and they bend, and you'll see some, if they're not made out of a sturdy enough material, they'll even break and snap. And they're just not designed to sink deep enough and really go in enough to actually be fatal most of the time. So I would say it's going to be very unlikely that even if a gang war or riot pops off that Melly is involved in, that he would meet his end in that way. So let's put that to the side and keep going with what kind of inmate is he going to be? Where exactly is he going to fall? So number 1, just with basic social skills and how to interact with the general population of inmates in prison, it is a developed skill, but it's one that Melly, from everything I know and have seen of him, seems to already have developed. I think that's just a byproduct of being from the street life. You know how to deal with people and talk to all types of people from all walks of life. Anytime you see him, let's just say in his interviews, whether he's talking to an interviewer who is more associated with the street life and, his type of lifestyle, who may have credentials and a reputation in that street life, he's very respectful. But then when you see him interviewed by someone who clearly is the exact opposite and has no ties and no experience in that lifestyle at all, which could commonly by other people be looked down upon, or maybe they would be treated or snubbed in a way by these people who come from the street lifestyle, he's the exact same level of respectful. And he conducts himself in a very certain way, a little bit reserved, but respectful and friendly and open. And he's not off-putting in any way when he interacts to a wide variety of people. And that's what it takes in prison to really get along for the most part, and just not, rub people the wrong way, because that can be a starter of a lot of altercations and a lot of issues with people. Just a simple small talk or brush by interaction is just goes the wrong way a little bit, and that's all it takes, because it's prison and everyone is so on edge and high strung. So I think he's good on that as far as just how to maneuver through prison with these other inmates and interacting. I don't think he'll have any issues there. Another thing, in addition to him having this gang affiliation with the Bloods, he's from a very specific, smaller neighborhood. And you see this a lot with the state prison systems. It's this way in my state prison system, South Carolina, which isn't too far or different from what I understand of the Florida state prison system. And I feel like it's this way in any state prison. The majority of inmates are going to come from a small handful of very specific neighborhoods throughout that state. That's just the way it is. And so you do get the large majority of the cell block consists of maybe 15 of these guys who are from this area of the state and this kind of general neighborhood, and then 20 of these guys, 10 of these guys, 14 of these guys, and it's kind of divided. And even though you're not in a actual gang, a legitimate gang, it kind of feels like a gang when you're in there with your hometown people. Everyone looks out. It's more in the way of, we're just going to look out for each other. We're from the same area. We got to stick together. We're family. We're from the same area. I know your people. You know my people. We know the same people. We got to take care of each other. We got to feed each other if we're hungry. We have to have each other's back. So not only, Melly is from a very small neighborhood in Florida that is known for being very close-knit and sticking together. And I imagine that only is amplified in prison, just from what I know in my experience. So he's not only going to have that support, but also the support of being affiliated with the Bloods. And then in addition to this, his role, he's a smaller guy. And hey, trust me, one thing I've learned is you can't judge a book by its cover. Just because someone looks this way or doesn't look this way, or is a bigger guy or is a smaller guy. I've seen big guys just not be very physically capable when it came down to it in prison. And I've seen very small guys take on multiple people, to my shock. So I've learned a lot, and I know you can't judge a book by its cover, but all I'm saying is, upon first looks, Melly is a smaller guy, not a lot of physical, like muscle tone or anything. He doesn't look like he would be very dangerous physically. Guns are one thing, but once you get to prison, there are no guns. It is all physical. It's either your hands or it's handheld weapons that you still have to get up close and personal and be able to inflict a lot of physical damage and take damage. And it's a whole nother game than just pointing a gun and shooting it. So, I'm not saying he isn't physically capable. Maybe he'd surprise me. Maybe he'd surprise everyone. But upon first glances and the way he's going to be perceived by most of the inmates is, in gangs, it's kind of divided into the heavy hitters who are going to be physically capable. They've proven themselves. They've earned their stripes. They've been in lots of altercations. They're the ones who are really the muscle. They're the ones who are really standing in the front line of this gang for any type of violence. And, they're the ones who are valued for what they can do physically. And then on the other end, you have the guys who are financially important. Usually in prison, these are the guys who are able to find a way to bring drugs in, bring contraband phones in, bring in contraband not only to supply to the gang, because the gang probably wants phones, they probably want some drugs, weed, whatever, tobacco, but also bring in this stuff to sell to other people for a profit and earn money and make a lot of money for your gang. And so those, it's kind of just, you're either one or the other as a valued member of the gang. And Melly, I just don't think, I wouldn't assume that he's going to be a heavy hitter, and he's going to be one of the guys on the front line really enforcing physically and violently for his gang. Melly has a lot of money. Melly is a superstar. Melly is a celebrity, if you don't know that. He's got a lot of money, and it doesn't take a whole lot of money to the level that Melly has to even be prison rich. But Melly has enough money to be considered richer than the average person in society. So in prison, he's going to be so valuable for his gang. He's going to be able to supply so much stuff and fund so many activities or operations. He is so important for his gang in there. And I've seen it, people with 10 times less money and money earning capabilities than Melly. They are, just that amount of earning capability and money being brought in for your gang makes you so important that you are heavily guarded. No one's going to touch you. The enforcers, the heavy hitters, they're going to be there for you. You're never going to have to lift a finger and participate in any type of violence or physical altercation most times. So if in that sense, that's the role I think he would play. Whether his ego gets in the way, and a lot of guys, they even if they get money, they don't, as a man, they don't want to feel like they're being protected. Some are fine with it, but some, and I just, from my judgment, I think Melly may fall into this category. Their ego, they don't want to feel like I'm being protected, I'm being guarded by these other guys. I'm my own man, I can stand up for myself. And he may get into a few squabbles or, little issues and altercations here just because he feels he may have to show that, hey, I'm not just a cash cow. He will be heavily protected and guarded just because of how important he is financially to his gang. He's got the backing of his gang. He's got the backing of his hometown in Florida. He's not an idiot. He doesn't have no social interaction capabilities to where we could just assume he's going to walk around there and say something ridiculous to some killer, who's just going to bash his head in. He's got sense, and he knows how to talk to people, and he knows how to just maneuver throughout these inmates. So all in all, I would say if Melly is found guilty and sentenced to any prison time, he will be just fine. And nothing is going to happen to Jamel Demons.